Saturn in Aries slows down thoughts. Thoughts that are moving like rapid fire. Saturn is an influence that is slow. And sometimes Saturn can feel like it's stuck or like it's a no. But it's actually just saying later. I think especially in the sign of Aries. Aries and Libra are sister signs. They're on the same axis. And there's this thought, this feeling about Aries and Libra being about now. And there are different forms of now. There's the now of action and acting impulsively, let's say. And then there's the now of having to take a decision, having to decide right now, in this moment, based on whatever information I have, based on relationships, based on, yeah. So all of this is now. Saturn in Aries moves me into self-respect because it moves me into self-reflection or introspection. Saturn is a slow energy, and Aries is I am. So it's about the self. It's about my head. So my brain, my intellect, my thoughts. And so if I'm having thoughts or using my intellect to think about myself in terms of my own inner psychology, who I am, why I do the things I do, that's useful and that's beneficial. Saturn in the sign of Aries slows down Aries. I think initially, in terms of the earlier parts of life, or in areas of our lives where we tend to struggle more, that have something to do with wherever Saturn and Aries is in our life, like whatever house it's sitting in and the topics of that house. When it's more of like, when the experiences I'm having in that spot are challenging, then Saturn in Aries is going to have issues with impulse control. I guess self-judgment, but not in a useful, lovely way. I might have issues with believing that I can handle something earlier than I actually can handle it, and then there will be some sort of loss. Yeah, and that's painful. At the same time, it creates the space for second chances being really, really powerful for Saturn and Aries. I say all of this because when we're working with this energy, instead of being so focused on trying to rush past the limits, the guardrails, the boundaries that Saturn is placing on us for our own protection, trying to push against them, instead of doing that, eventually I settle and I sit and I reflect. And when I turn inwards and I reflect, what felt like control, imposition, opposition from Saturn figures in my life, from Saturn experiences, limitations, boundary structure, strict rules, regulations, etc., authority, what felt like a no, and pressure from all of these kind of spaces and people, and internal pressures as well. Maybe I'm the one who's shutting myself down, saying no. All of that turns into a yes. So instead of it being no, it was later. Because there's a desire for me to understand that I have. And in having, I have self-respect. My actions have meaning and purpose. And they're so beautiful and useful and wonderful that I shouldn't rush them. I should be patient so that they can be birthed, manifested in their full glory, respect, honor. And so that whatever fruit or whatever experiences come from those actions, they will continue to support and cement my self-honor. Yeah, building my integrity. Yeah, this foundation of respect and truth. This is what Saturn and Aries graces its natives with. I have Saturn and the headless Ketu conjunct in Aries. And I say the headless Ketu because in Vedic astrology, Ketu is the south node. And as far as I understand, Ketu represents the part of a constellation where it's like the body, or the tail rather. And then its counterpart, Rahu, the north node, represents the head. I have Saturn and the headless Ketu conjunct in Aries. I can run around acting without knowing why, without knowing the purpose of my actions. Saturn slows me down so that I can reflect. Rather than acting on instinct alone, acting on bodily memory alone. And that's good, because then my task, my actions have meaning. They have self-respect. Saturn in Aries is self-respect. Saturn in Aries is self-reflect. Why am I doing what I am doing? For me in my life, I've experienced moments when, based on a fear, and that's a Saturn kind of word, I act on impulse. I act rashly because it's like self-protection. I want to protect myself. And all that impulse stuff is Aries. With the South Node being there, it speaks to a long-standing habit of this in my history, in my karmas, in my actions. But the thing is that when I'm acting headless, running around, just doing things without taking the time to reflect, I'm acting on instinct, I'm acting on old emotions. And I'm reinforcing a foundation, like a foundational habit. And I'm also reinforcing the belief that those sort of actions are me. So if I'm doing something without understanding why, I might resign myself, and let's say it's something that I'm not happy about. I might resign myself to believing that that's just who I am. That's the way I am. When this happens, this is my instinct. This is my fight, my flight, my fawn, whatever it is. And so when I can move that energy from instant action into just taking a pause, just to see what's going on, just pausing, just slowing down, just stopping. Instead of pushing against that handbrake that Saturn has put on in my car, if I say, okay, I'll ease up a little bit. I'll bring in some of the Libra from the Aries Libra axis, and I'll add some gentleness, I'll add some grace. I'll slow down a little bit. Then either intuitively or consciously, like with my intellect, I will be able to understand. I'll be able to create a plan, a structure, a strategy about how to move forward. I'll understand that what feels like it needs my immediate attention doesn't. Because I want to go about this habit that's been repeating itself over and over in my life differently in this moment. And so with the help of Saturn, the grace of Saturn, not the grace of Saturn, grace of God, but working with this energy, I can use Saturn's resources of structure, time, etc., and apply them to my situation so that I can move forward. In my integrity as well, in my honesty. Aries is associated with honesty also. And that's a beautiful thing. When I slow down my thinking, I become aware of the process step by step, either intuitively or through my intellect. I'm processing the material consciously. When I know what I'm doing, I don't act like an ass, frankly. I have an example. So in an elevator, a child presses all of the buttons. And she does that when she enters the elevator with her mom. This story, when I heard it, I understood that that's not the correct behavior for anyone to do. Like I got that. Like, oh, that, in terms of society, you just shouldn't do stuff like that. But I didn't understand why. Like I was like, what? But what is wrong with that? In terms of like, what's the issue? I knew it didn't look good, but I didn't understand why. And then I just was walking into the elevator in a space where I felt calm, like I was sitting, like my mind is sitting. And then the thought arose about how if I press a different button or 3 more buttons, the elevator has to go to all those floors before it comes back to ground, where the people who maybe just got home from work are pressing the button because they want to go up to the 11th floor, the 14th floor, wherever. And so if a kid, or an individual in general, presses all the buttons, it's a waste. It's a waste of time. And people can't get home. And that's a very simple, obvious, in a way, answer. In a very obvious way, it's an obvious answer. But sometimes I experience that the mind is so jittery that it's jumping to conclusions or making assumptions about why things are happening the way they're happening. So, for instance, a kid shouldn't press all the buttons in the elevator. Oh, I know that. You shouldn't do that. But if someone asks me why, because I'm moving so fast in my mind, that piece of awareness about the value of time and about being aware of those around me, all of that seems to go out the window. I don't have access to it in that moment anymore. Yeah. And then maybe I feel kind of silly or stupid. If someone actually did ask me that question and wanted me to give them an answer, like a child, let's say, I feel silly all of a sudden. But it's not that I don't know the answer, it's just that I'm not aware of it in that moment. I just go to the assumption of society says don't push all the buttons. So that's the beautiful thing about Saturn and Aries, is that it places me in my self-respect by placing me in now rather than running around in my memories and then kind of projecting that outwards onto life, assuming that I know how things will happen or how things will come out in the end. Oh, this is what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. It's better to just be aware and see all the steps unfolding step by step as a process, as a procedure. I'm aware of every moment. And I imagine that could sound very overwhelming, but it isn't when I'm taking it moment by moment. Sometimes we think we know why someone is doing what they're doing, and we write them off with assumptions. We just assume. It's better to suspend judgment. Libra, Saturn exalted in Libra. It's better to suspend my judgment and wait, watch, listen. Eventually, I will know or come to understand. Saturn blesses us, graces us. Saturn blesses us with wisdom wherever it's placed in our birth chart.